And you want butters to know that they're being fairly treated too. I mean, everybody in the process needs to be treated fairly by an impartial board.
Right.
But part of that fair treatment is also that it's efficient.
Right.
It makes, if you need to do something before the snow flies, it doesn't help to get that permit in January when you apply for it in June.
And everybody ought to walk out of the room understanding why the decision went one way or the other.
Right.
Not walking out of it going, I don't understand how they came up with that.
Yeah. They may not all agree with it, and that's life.
Yeah, right.
But if you've got a basis that's in the ordinance, on the basis of what was submitted to you, and it's supportable, then you've done your job. People may contest it. That happens.
Right, that's okay.
That's life, and sometimes you get reversed.
Right.
You do the best you can. This is a board of people who are not experts, you're not judges. You're doing the best you can with your training and your background to apply the ordinance to a particular application. That's all people can ask of you, is do your best.
And I think it's easy, I think it makes sense to ask for some professional support for that. The select board leads on Amy. You know, I mean, we pay Amy, we expect her to have answers to, or go get answers from our, do we need to do this way? Can we,
right.
That's, we have somebody sitting with us that helps us through that process. At the end of the day, it's not her choice.
No.
We don't have to listen. But
I can only advise you. I can't tell you what to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
So in the ordinance, under public hearings, it talks about that, it has to be in the newspaper at least 2 weeks, at least 2 times, which,
We don't even do that.
that's 2 weeks because
You can't
we
do
have
that
a
in
once
the
a week
2 week.
paper,
Yeah.
and that it should be published, let's see, it should be published at least 7 days in advance of the hearing in the newspaper, general circulation.
Well, you could pay to put it
Sometimes.
in the list
And
of
in
signs.
this conspicuous area here. It doesn't say who does that.
Well, the planning
I
board
was
shall
under the impression
publish.
that-
Yeah.
Right, the planning board shall. So I was under the impression that the chairman, because he usually sort of makes note of it, supposedly, ask you, like, within the next day.
Right. I just want to make everybody aware that there's no way to be able to publish the notice in the paper.
In the Bethel Citizen.
In the Bethel Citizen 7 days in advance. That is not.
Well, we might be able to do 7 days in advance, but you can't do 2 circulations, because the paper only comes out once a week.
Unless we're doing it in the Sun Journal, which is, we're gonna have to blow that budget up a bit.
Well,
It's
Does
expensive.
anybody read it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, considered a
and
local
in
paper.
these days,
Right.
even fewer people are reading those
Right.
newspapers and those legals, right?
Right.
But that's still what the law requires.
Is that the law or is that?
That's our ordinance. I don't think the law
No,
requires.
For public hearings for subdivisions, yes.
Pesky planning laws.
I know.
So we're gonna have to pay to put it in the Sun Journal.
We have never done that.
Well, let me ask this
Right.
question.
Just letting you.
Part of your problem with notice is because the planning board meets every 2 weeks. Are you folks really that busy that you have to meet every 2 weeks?
Depends on what time of year it is, sometimes.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows like
Yeah,
everything else.
Yeah.
That, that would slow things down for the applicant.
Not many communities get 80 lot subdivisions, do they?
Not too many.
No, so Newry does, so it depends on what Newry gets for applications.
Well, suppose you
So
went
3 of
to,
those, three subdivisions, 1 of 30, 1 of 50, and 1 of 80,
within 1 year?
within the same agenda day. Which has been done in the past.
Yeah, but it hasn't been in the last 4 years. We've had a couple of subdivisions that have changed hands, but we have not had.
Well, here's a suggestion. There may be times when you need to meet more frequently.
Absolutely.
Maybe what you could do is you could start with once a month. And then if you have the big application that comes in that needs a lot of work, you say, we're going to have a special meeting next month, a special, 2 weeks, so we'll have 2 meetings next month in order to get rid of the backlog or to deal with that 80-lot subdivision.
Well, I think by getting the applications in advance and not at the very first meeting, that speeds things up right there.
You send out a butter notice out right away.
Yeah.
You know, no reason not to. And I don't know that I put that on the applicant. You receive it, get the notice out there.
So they have always, so the way that it works, it has worked here forever, is a part of the application is they'll call us and say, we need the addresses for all of these maps and lots. So we provide them the addresses, and then they send them out, and they give us a copy of the notice.
Okay, but you can do that, and, or, you know, you could do it for them and charge them. Either way, that's fine. No
It
reason to
doesn't
keep-
allow us to do that, though. Like, doesn't it have to be in the UDRO for us to be able to charge them additional fees?
We can always amend the UDRO.
Okay, but
But I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
but-
what is the process that works and that you want to do? You want to keep things, that's fine, leave that alone. But as far as the next piece of it, you know, getting the professional, just making sure the notice is published and a copy goes into the file for the planning board, so that everybody knows this was done. And we move on to the substance, the completeness, and then you have the planner available to help out. Those are all things that will help the process.
right, absolutely.
How does the
I-
planning board feel?
Because it does say that the planning board shall notify by mail the applicant and all property owners within 1,000 feet of the property.
For a public hearing.
Or,
It's-
oh, that's.
For a public hearing.
Yeah, that's still
Right.
public hearing, sorry.
But there's notice also.
Is there always a public hearing?
No, sometimes we vote to not hold a public hearing or not hold a site visit. But it sounds like we should hold a public hearing more often.
I think that'd be great. How do you get people to come?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean.
Well, at least you've given them the opportunity.
Right.
And it's a little harder for
So I
them to
think the public
complain later.
hearings, when we do schedule them, we can schedule them for like 6:30, unless it's a major application, then we can schedule it for 6, the night before meeting, and then, I mean, we're
Yeah.
hearing it. But
It's a frustration of mine, the
Thanks.
amount of time and energy we've put into public hearings for no reason.
For nobody to come.
And also, typically it's 60 days if it's a public hearing, it's 90 days for determination.
So you buy a little more
For the
time.
decision on the application.
You know, I think if we're clear with applicants of what they should expect for a timeframe, then it's up to them to, you know, if anybody walks in here expecting a decision that night,
Right.
they're
Which
confused.
they
Okay.
used to, and they don't anymore.
Yeah.
Because they know that we pretty much just take the application and say, see you next time.
Right. But if anybody thinks, you know, if we think we can turn applications around in 30 days, then make that the expectation. But if that's not the expectation, man, if you got a project going, you better get here 90 days early. If it's 90 days, just know going in that you're gonna need 90 days to get your project done. But whatever that is, and then, you know, unforeseen circumstances, 90 doesn't become 120, 180.
So if we're gonna move to getting their initial application in a paper format as well as a digital format ahead of time, how do we advertise that? How do we let applicants know that,
On the application.
Right on the application form. like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
So they
everything,
normally start with the town office and say, I want to get on the planning board agenda, right?
Sometimes.
sometimes,
How else do they get on the agenda? They call
sometimes.
Call you directly?
Call chairman, vice chairman.
If I go on Westbrook's website, there's an application, there's actually a listing that tells me how I apply for a permit. What I need, what are the steps, what are the things I need
Well, there's
to
an
do.
application that you just.
There's an application form there, but overall, what's the process? I file my application, I have to do it electronically, I want 10 copies submitted.
Just the application, and on the application, it details
Yeah,
what
you can do any of that.
When we haven't spoon-fed the people like that, we make them plow through the UDRO and find all that stuff. If they do happen to call, I'll try and spoon-feed them with all the information, but no, we haven't got anything like that.
I understand that.
The more spoon feeding, I think, would make it easier for everybody.
And
You
that's
know
what I
what I mean?
try and do.
Yeah.
That's the
Give him the applications that he could
Yeah,
take with him.
there's nobody in the public that's to read this and tell you that.
But you could have a process, so somebody calls you, or somebody calls anybody in the planning board and says, I want to, I want to apply, can you put me on the agenda? Certainly, here's how you do that.
Yeah.
And then you send them to a website, or you send
Yeah,
them to.
well, they used to call here and if they'd like, we want to get on the planning board agenda, and we would give them Doug's phone number or an email address and tell them to contact Doug. And then we had a lot of people contact us and say we contacted him and we can't get a hold of him. So that's when we would go through the process of sending it out to the planning board email as well as Becky, hoping that somebody would get on the agenda.
Yeah. And, we may need to make a few changes to the, I'm looking at the procedure that's set up now. It has a voluntary pre-application conference and an applicant may request, I'm looking at page 22 on procedure. It talks about the applicant shall submit an application for approval at a scheduled meeting of the planning board. Well, we're going to change that, it'll come to town hall. That's where you would probably say under the procedure that it will be submitted electronically and
the paper
6
copy.
copies of paper or something like that, whatever you think you need, but whatever you think you need to make it easy for the board and the town. But the changes would be made up here, and this is, it's kind of spoon feeding them, but we want to make sure they do what they're supposed to do. So
We're here to spoon feed.
we'll give them the directions they need to do the right thing.
That's better for everybody.
Yep. So there's a place, and then
Right.
fees.
And even on number 2, where it says the applicant shall submit a complete application. Just the biggest one.
At least wishful thinking, right? And then, and here, all applications shall be accompanied by an application fee as established by the selectmen payable to the town of Newry. The selectmen over time can take a look at how much is this costing us. The planner and for
Right.
Amy's time or whatever, advertising time, and then come up with a fee schedule that makes sense to try to get some of that back.
Right.
There's a provision in here that said additional fees shall be either 50%. There's an additional fee to aid the planning board in review, and that's the planning board at its discretion. What some towns do is say that there's an escrow that has to be paid for outside review costs. Let's say someone comes in and you have an engineer look at it, a town engineer, but you want to hire an engineer. We've probably done that before to take a look at an application. Or maybe somebody wants to put a concert venue in and you want to have an acoustic engineer take a look at it.
Get on the news.
Do you feel that verbiage acquaints getting AvCog to do it?
Well, there may be some things that are beyond AvCog's capabilities. I don't know if they have an engineer on staff, but maybe you need to hire Woodard and Curran down in Portland to come and take a look at some structural steel or whatever that's being
So I guess
proposed.
what I'm asking, does that verbiage cover anything? Anybody the town wants to hire to look at that application?
Probably does.
Whether it be AvCog or an engineer or anybody.
Probably does. Planning board at its discretion may require the applicant to pay an additional fee to aid the planning board in its review. You might want to be a little more, you might say, professional or technical review or something like that. $2,500 may not be enough.
Yeah, if you're gonna have Woodward and Curran come and look at a project or,
Somebody
That's-
wants to propose a road on the side of the mountain, big road extension for a subdivision, and you may want to have someone look at that. It may be $5,000 or something, maybe a very
or
reasonable
somebody wants to
fee.
put a sky bridge up.
You want it to be reasonable, you don't want to scare people off, but you want to make sure that the planning board not only has, we talk about planner resources, legal resources, but technical resources to help them review an application. So anyway, just some things that, while we're talking about it here to try to professionalize, these are some of the things that other towns are doing. Having that escrow out there or the ability to ask for funds to be placed up front for technical review. So in looking at the outline I put in, some of this is really more toward, how do you put together a finding of fact, conclusion of law, what's it in, how do you run a meeting? These are things that the planning board can look at their leisure. We do run across this in MMA training. I think what we were talking about tonight was more nuts and bolts as to how to make things work better. And it sounds like there's some good ideas out there. It's a question of working.
How do we
together
implement
with
them? Yeah, how do we implement them?
I think the first step is to Amy will be talking to AvCog, and that'll be a good first step to see what's the feasibility for getting that planner. I think coming up with some concrete ideas as to how we do that filing and maintain it. Is that something that you want that planner to be doing? I don't know, because the planner's going to understand the documents, but that's more time.
Yeah, to me, it's that checklist that says what's supposed to be in there. So that, and here's the order it's supposed to be in, so that when you go to look for it,
That's
there
going to
it
be
is.
tougher. The
Yeah.
order's going to be tougher, Jim. The checklist, I think, of what's filed, great. Checklist of what was done overall at the end, fine. It's in the decision that Becky writes up. But it's the in-between, the order that it's in. Just put it in by date is about all you're going to be able to
Right,
do.
that's what we tried to implement, didn't gain much traction, was each meeting was a folder, dated folder, everything that got received that date, had a stamp date on it, also went into the folder.
So you have your big red well and you put it in by
Right.
folder on the big projects.
That lost traction, we're here now.
Who's going to have that job maintaining that folder? Brooks drops the file off from the to-be filed box.
Well, currently how it typically works is, I kind of end up doing it.
You do?
Well, like after the last meeting, what was this week's applicants' handouts that he put in? And I was the one that made sure that the handout stuff was available for public viewing. So we have a lot of loose ends unraveling all the time. Meaning, yes, we need some way to make sure that stuff each night, after each meeting, gets in the file, and that the public file, viewing file, is updated also. And depending on how busy everybody is, that might not always happen currently.
Yeah, I think I was trying to get us to a point where we had a clear process. Cleaning up the area was like step one, and then step two is how do we have a clear process where we have a to be filed box where, if you have multiple projects going on, they're either paperclip. What I don't want to see happen is you have 4 applications and all the stuff gets thrown in there and we're trying to figure out where
You
it
need a
goes.
file for each application.
Right, absolutely.
And whatever comes in that night or gets done is in that one folder for each one, and then you have it in the file box. Great.
Yeah. And it's still on the back burner, but it just hasn't happened. And I think the struggle has been that we were trying to communicate with the planning board chair, and it just weren't really a lot of things happened this summer that just made that not feasible. We're back on it now. Give us a couple more months and we can definitely take this over. If it's as quickly as you've got a box there and we're filing it in the established folder in there, that's not going to be an issue. If there's a note saying that we need to establish a folder, that wouldn't be an issue, but we need to have some communication from the planning board, what they're looking for to file it away. At this point, it's not going to be as bad as it, we spent 2 or 3 days going through all of that. And I'm not entirely sure if it's 100%. We never threw anything away.
Okay. It seems like someone or some position has to have the
It's gonna be
obligation.
the responsibility.
Yeah.
Right.
Whether you say it's the town clerk, the deputy town clerk, or the code enforcement officer, someone, you have to say this is the person, the job, the position who takes care of it.
And it can be we'll work together to get this done, but at the end of the day, the responsibility falls on someone.
If no one has the responsibility, then
It doesn't get done.
there's no accountability.
We can take that over in my office, that's not the issue. The issue is that we need to know what to do with stuff.
Well,
And there
right.
is no clear process on how we're supposed to file away the stuff.
Right,
So,
and we're also talking about electronically
Yeah.
bringing it in too, so there's a little, another level of complexity.
and then I think that, you know, of course, every time we talk about doing things electronically, we need to understand that these are huge files. So when you're scanning a PDF, this is a huge file, and I need to look into our website and make sure we have the data capability to be able to do something along those lines and actually have those online, or have pay for a Google Drive and have them on a Google Drive or something along those
One
lines.
thing you may find though, when you're speaking to AvCog, I'll bet they've worked on their own system in-house and with other town systems. They might have some advice or suggestions as to how to work with electronic filings and, you know, and so it may be that you're getting the application electronically, you're getting the plans electronically. The comments may come in hard copy, the neighbor's letter or whatever. But it's easier to just scan that neighbor's letter if the application's already electronic, and you're doing that much less.
Right.
So maybe the paper things that are submitted that Brooks has at the end of the night in a particular file may have to be scanned, and then you put the file away. So-
Right, yeah, and I think if we got clear instructions on what they want done with each one of those things, then we don't mind doing the legwork in my office, but,
Well, I don't know that you need instructions so much as there has to be a process.
well, that's what I'm,
And
like,
so-
right now, we don't have one. We don't have a
And I think
process.
that we've got to get away from the mindset of your office and this office. You know, we
Well,
need to work together.
when,
It's a town's problem and it isn't a departmental problem.
so we were just talking about who was gonna take this over. So I'm saying I have no problem with my office taking this over. You know, this doesn't need to be a CEO function, this doesn't need to be, you know, a planner function. I have no problem taking it over, but we need to have a clear process for this, Brooks.
No
And-
big deal, no big deal. We
That's
gotta
the-
communicate about it.
That's the piece I'm talking about, and I know you said it'd be hard, but what I'm hearing you say is, I don't know what to put in the file.
That's right.
I don't know what to put in, I don't know what to put in there. So that's where I'm saying, if you've got that checklist, or that you know, that append, that, you know, the contents that says, you know, here's what goes in the file. You know, and then you can check those things, and if you have, you know, item D you can't find, then, you know, then you communicate back to the planning board saying, I can't find item D. You know, it's not in the file because I can't find it.
Well, you know there'll be an application, you know there'll be copies of notice. There may be letters from abutters, there may not be. There may be other, you know, engineers or experts for abutters
Right.
or opponents. There may not be.
But that could be an NA or not available or.
Sure, or you could do that, or not applicable, and
Yeah.
then we move on. It sounds like something that, just big picture, the town is making a commitment to work with the planning board to make things more professional and efficient so that you spend your time more wisely. The process is more transparent, and everybody can get the materials they need and the reviews they need. And now it's a question of Amy working with Doug and all of you so that things can be done in an orderly fashion that everyone understands, so that we all know the expectations and it just gets done.
1 year, 5 year, 10 years later, someone goes back and says, hey, I have a question. On what? Here's the information. Now, if it's 10 years ago, we've got to take a minute to digest it.
Sure.
But if it happened a year ago, there's probably going to be some institutional memory that goes, yeah, no, I remember that
Right.
decision. Here's what we talked about. Here's our reasons why, and here it is in the file. But that's the, you know, it's about working together, but it's also protecting us so that when the shit hits the fan, because it's coming, you know, we're, yeah, no, come on in. Well, you open the drawer. We'll show you. You want me to send it to you? I'll send it to you.
It's part of the minutes that you're preparing. And minutes aren't required by state law. What's required is a record of a meeting so that, you know, date, time, and place of meeting, were there motions, what was the motion, who voted on it, if it was a roll call, the names of the persons. That's required by state law. Anything else is what you want to do. But it makes sense to have good minutes. They don't have to be a verbatim transcript.
Right.
But good minutes so that people understand what was discussed, that,
Yes,
as Jim mentioned,
yeah.
10 years from now, when, you know, maybe memberships changed, or maybe 20 years from now, memberships changed, you can say, that's what we didn't want.
Right. I mean, I try to at least summarize very briefly a discussion. And at the top of the page, it says, for further information on any topic noted below, a recording is available in the town office. You can sit there and listen to the meeting if you want to, like, really.
And you keep those recordings, state law says 6 years anyway, you keep those recordings, but.
I've never deleted them, have you? I mean, I think they're there.
No, apparently
20-some odd years.
the recorder had stuff on there from when Loretta was here. That's why.
Oh, I always
died.
delete the,
Is that the one that ran out on us
Yeah.
last night?
no, in the planning board thing, I always delete.
Yeah, well, apparently we have.
Once I put it there, I delete it at the beginning of the next meeting. I used to delete it after I uploaded it there, but one time it didn't actually upload, and I'd already deleted it. So that.
We won't say anything, but
That one's
in
fine.
general, once you
But
upload it, you keep it
now-
for 6 years anyway.
Yeah. I upload it there at the end of the night, and then at the next meeting, I clear out folder B before we start. Because one time, and I'd asked Kelly to make sure that folder A was always deleted too, because that happened to us one time at a meeting, at planning board meeting, where it just
Just beeped
stopped
at you?
because it was too full.
Yeah, it beeped at us.
Yeah. So, yeah, I can't, the recording doesn't hold that much. So,
Well, apparently they didn't delete all of them, because the last one we found at Loretta 4 years ago.
Oh, well. One thing that Jim suggested was if you could give me a copy of your current application forms for under the UDRO and all, that would be great. I just, we can work from those and help you get started, if that's all right.
Because we're gonna have to, if we're gonna put that online, we're gonna have to
Right.
build it to be online.
Well, it's online, it's just not completely
Billable.
billable.
Is it?
Some
Right.
places are billable,
Yeah.
others aren't.
Yeah.
All the applications are online except for the sign print.
Oh, okay, all right, then I can just download it from there. But, you know, let's identify the process we want, figure out what changes need to be made to the application forms, to the UDRO to get that plate in place, and what changes have to be made internally so that you can do the electronic filings and make things more available to everyone, make sure the notice is done properly, and then, you know, see what the planning situation is, so that we know what the town has to work with for a budget, what it might cost.
So, the other thing, when I was just reading through here, I'm sorry to
Well,
interrupt.
please,
The draft minutes.
right,
Normally, when I get the draft minutes done, I send them to the chairman, he reviews them quickly. Once he says okay, then I share them with just the planning board members. At the next meeting, they vote to approve them.
Right.
Once they're approved, I change the watermark, send them all to the planning board members, including Dave, and to the town office for their files.
okay, but if I come in and I file a freedom of access request to say, or just say I want to see the draft minutes, I have a right to see them, they're
Okay.
public record.
Right, so.
Keep a watermark
How,
on them.
right, I do, but how quickly am I expected to get those done? Because I have like, a few other jobs.
I understand. Well, okay, well, this is an important thing. The freedom of access request, people call it the right to know law, but let's think about what it's really called is freedom of access. I have the right of access to public records and public meetings, proceedings. If the record doesn't exist yet, I don't have any right to see it. You don't have to create something. I have a right
Okay.
to see things that
Right.
exist. I don't have a right to force you to
Right.
create it.
I mean, because
If they're not ready, they're not ready, but if you
Right.
have a draft,
Right.
then it is a public
Because
record.
during the meeting, I
Just make
type
sure-
very little, because now I'm also
You're
a
trying to be
board
a board
member.
member.
I know,
Yeah.
so I do most of it from the recording,
I understand.
so, okay.
No, that's fine, Becky. It's just that at the point where you have a draft, or you just watermark it so that it's clear that it's a draft and it's a public record, and people can look at it, but it's not official until the board acts.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
Now, when should we have the tape available for them to listen to?
I upload that night, the night of it, onto that computer.
And that's fine. I mean, if I come in with a freedom of access request, it doesn't have to be in writing, it can be oral, it can, I can just say, Amy, I want such and such a document or a recording. And Amy has 5 working days or whoever, I assume Amy is the freedom of access officer for the town.
Yep, that would be correct.
That's another hat, huh?
Yep.
So with recordings, do we have to give them a copy of the recording, or they can just sit here and listen?
They could sit here and listen if they
Right.
want to. They can ask for a recording, and it's easy enough to just download onto a flash drive.
Put it on
Just
the
charge
drive.
them.
That's what we were
Charging
doing.
the
Yeah,
$10.
we didn't charge anybody,
I
but
understand, it's
we gave the recordings for all of the lift surface. They came in, we downloaded it to a flash drive and
Maybe we should have released it to Netflix.
yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So that's what and typically if it's electronic and it takes 2 seconds or less than 10 minutes, we're not charging
Mhm.
them. I mean, we have to do the first hour anyway,
Right.
correct?
Correct.
So,
And then 15
and
after.
then $15 an hour, which is
Yeah.
not even enough money to,
Mhm.
it's crazy.
Understand.
Yeah.
And
Minimum wage is $12 an hour and you're gonna, yeah. So anyway. So we don't charge, there's no real point in charging. When they ask for like a completed application, I think I charged them the 10 cents a copy for that. But
whatever
it
the
was-
cost of the paper and toner
Yeah.
is. Yeah, and towns are all over the place on that, but I think it's right to charge just the cost of the paper and toner. I went into, oh heck, I'll name the town. I went into Hollowell one time when I was doing some work for an oil company and asked for some copies of documents. They were charging me $5 a page.
I know
It was a
that.
profit center.
That is.
$5. I
All towns
protested.
should run like a business.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I protested, but I paid my $5 per page.
Now they come in with the camera.
Well, that's it. That's it. I pull out my cell phone, I suppose, and just take a screenshot, and then okay.
Yeah.
Is this what you were looking for me for this evening? Is that,
It is for me. I mean, so I don't think we've made any decisions.
no?
We're just, we've had a process for a number of years, times have changed, where I don't see us getting any less busy. I don't see the laws becoming any clearer. You know what I mean? There's so many pieces and parts out there, I think it's time for us to look at how do we do this better. And there's, a couple things we've talked about tonight. One is information prior to the meeting so the planning board can show up, having seen what's in front of them. And, applicants can expect to have a conversation, not just thank you, we'll take a look. And the other piece we've talked a bunch about is, how do we file the information so that it's accessible, we can find it, we know what it is, and off we go. The answers we gotta get are, what's it gonna cost us? What's it gonna cost us and what's the best way to do it? You mentioned Google Drive. I'm a big Google Drive fan. I've started doing it. It's pretty easy and it's very, you can put stuff into files and you can search in Google Drive really easily, which might be the way to, to get a lot of this done, and then everybody's got access to the drive and they can just go get it. So,
So as far as changing the way applications are submitted, that ends up being a revision to the UDRO that has to be approved by the town. True.
But if we figure out what the process should be,
Right.
and what should work,
Right, and
then we can make the changes to the ordinance. I'm
right,
sure
it's
town meeting.
most
will-
likely it would get approved by the town.
I would
which
hope
is
so.
Yeah, just making sure that we change it every place we're supposed to.
Right. Yeah, we can work with you on that.
outside of the planning board and the select board, I'm not sure how many people are interested in the planning board ordinance.
Roads
The
as far as-
UDRO,
Well,
nobody's
just-
interested in the UDRO until they want to do a project.
Right, at least the process they're not gonna worry about.
Yeah.
The standards, they'd complain when you get
Process,
there.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
the
we
goal-
still, even though we still can't change it without a vote.
Right, and the goal is to come out of all of this with a fair process that's understandable for everybody. With, if there are expectations coming in, and, here's the amount of time it should take, and here's why decisions are being made.
Right.
So, I want to put a blank in town, well, it just doesn't fit, so.
Right. And the other thing we talked briefly about was whether or not we change to a once-a-month thing and just do an extra meeting when needed, for like large,
Right.
I don't know how serious that conversation was.
You start a little bit earlier so you didn't have a longer night,
Yeah. But sometimes starting earlier doesn't work though, because
Well,
then
it's just
people that
suggested.
are away
Yeah.
can't, get here. And so many people came to the 5 o'clock meeting.
But, going to a once-a-month meeting cycle doesn't mean you can't meet more frequently when things pick up. You can always add a
Right.
special meeting every 2 weeks or something until you clear your docket.
I mean, we do that with the select board, there's a couple times a year we don't meet twice a month because there's nothing to talk about.
Right, and I know like when Pat was chairman, we would sometimes cancel a meeting because there was nothing on the agenda.
Right.
So, but I think it says somewhere that we're supposed to meet at least once a month.
And
Now,
that,
the ordinance, if you think about the ordinance and the timing, it's set up to be once a month.
Right.
That's the 30 days and all that sort of stuff. So it's definitely set up as a once a month ordinance.
Yeah.
so once you make the decisions as to, what you want to change procedurally, ideally, then we can work with you, as far as AdCog, and change the ordinance, change things around. And Kenny, for you, on this outline, there's some material in here about planning board procedures and what you do, how you do it. They're probably good for the whole board, but particularly someone new to the board, it's there. There's also a discussion of the Freedom of Access Act, because that applies to everybody. You all work in that. You're holding a public meeting, and there are requirements there. We've talked about that before, but also in public records. And then there's some liability discussion on there. You don't have to put the house in your spouse's name because we're on a public board, so it's okay. There are protections. The town's generally not liable for anything. Where it is liable, there's insurance, and there's a limit of $400,000. Unless you buy more insurance than you need, you're responsible for the limit of insurance. For municipal officials, employees, the rule's the opposite. You're liable unless there's some way that you get out. There's qualified immunity. There's immunity for making judicial decisions or quasi-judicial decisions. And where there is liability, the town has insurance. I hope will be paid up.
We are.
Okay, and the liability is limited to $10,000. There's insurance, and as long as you haven't done anything intentionally wrong, you haven't punched someone or whatever, then the town will indemnify and defend and hold you harmless. It's generally okay.
Joke about that, but I've had that happen.
I've seen stuff happen.
Yeah. Yeah, Brooks's brother was there and witnessed the whole thing.
Oop.
Cable television's awful rocky business, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's good clarification, Jim, that if it's, legislative, it can be discussed. If it's judicial,
Right.
it's in this
It's
room.
in the room.
Yeah.
And there'll be people who are your neighbors or friends, they'll see you in the store and they'll say, hey, you got that application in front of you for a subdivision. We'll tell you how I feel about that. You've got to somehow say, I can't talk to you about that, except to come on down to the meeting and we'll
Right.
talk and tell us all then. And if they blurt it out before you can stop them, then at the meeting, yeah, I know. But at the meeting you can say, I didn't intend to, but I had a wound up hearing about this at the local IGA or whatever, and here's what I heard. I just want you to know I'm still capable of making an impartial decision, but I want everybody to know what I heard so you can react to it and say what you have to. Site visits. You guys do site visits, right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Really? It does help sometimes to be able to see the property in the context and say, oh yeah, that's where the house is going and that's where.
Pardon me?
I think the last, if we had gone to the actual ski slope and saw the slope,
It might have been helpful.
might have been very helpful.
Well,
Are you allowed to separately?
no, that's where I was going. Thank you. Do it as a board with notice to the public, and the idea there is not to hold a hearing on site. You'd like people to say, yes, this is where it is, or give me a balloon to show me how high it is, and that's all fine. Where's it going? Where's the creek? Where's the road? Those are all fine things. You don't want a hearing on the merits there. You don't want people breaking off in little groups. You're there to see the site, so you're all familiar with it. You come back and you hold your hearing here. You do not go individually to the site, because here's the danger. The applicant's home said, hey, Brooks, you've come out to the site. Hey, let me show you where I'm going to do. And this is why it meets all this. nobody else knows what we talked about, and you might make your mind up based on something that nobody else knew in the room. And that's just not fair to the applicant, to the abutters, and to the process. So that's why you don't go out individually. It taints the process.
I think, not when I was a board member, but I think in the past, once or twice, it was brought up that way, that people could, was it Dreammaker? It was before I was a board member.
It's been done quite a bit where the chairman said, oh, you guys can go take a look if you want.
Right.
I
We aren't gonna have a
That's
site
something we need to
visit.
I
but you guys
strongly
can go
advise
look.
against that. Go as a board with public notice it like any other meeting, and anybody can go.
Yeah.
Because it's open to the neighbors. You know, you might have an applicant who says, I don't want anyone but the planning board coming on my lot. You say, that's fine, we can't do that, it's a public meeting. So
Right.
if you want us to make a decision without seeing your property, fine.
Yeah.
You don't,
So, the tough question, and go to the fall line application. I may be wrong, but the abutters had an issue with the project. Their issue was not part of the UDRO. How do you deal with that?
well, it probably has happened to the selectmen too, but there will be times when people get emotional about an application. They're upset about it, and they feel wronged, and, you know, their feelings are their feelings, and
Right.
you have to deal with it. I think it's the job of the chair, whether it's the selectman or the planning board, to say, I'm glad to see everyone here tonight, I'm glad you want to comment on it. I'm going to ask you to keep your comments germane to what we have in front of us. We have to apply these 20 standards. Please direct your comments to those standards so we can make a decision. If you may be upset for other reasons, that's beyond what we can do. In the same vein, I don't think it may never happen here, but you may look up if you're chair and you see that there are 100 people in the room and you're looking at the clock saying, okay, it's a 6 o'clock meeting. We'll be here till midnight if we let everybody speak as long as they want. You can say, we've got a lot of people here. We want to hear from all of you, and out of respect to you in the process, I ask that you keep your comments to under 3 minutes, and that you not be repetitive, and that you direct your comments to the ordinance that's in front of us. You can do that.
And can we put an end time on the public hearing?
Well,
No.
I'd rather not do that. What you can do, though, is say, by 10 o'clock we're all cooked, and we'll just schedule another night. We'll continue it.
And I think Doug did a good job from reading the minutes of saying, it needs to relate to the ordinance.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think
Yeah.
that's the best way I can think of to do it. Recognizing that there will be people, you'll get someone who gets up and says something and everyone starts applauding.
Yeah.
We're not here to cheer, we're here to address the ordinance. I appreciate you have strong feelings,
It was interesting, so Doug had said that, everybody was told that, or I thought they knew that. And at the end, when the board made its decision, people were, so that's it? We don't matter? You matter, but it doesn't fit the ordinance, it's not.
I'll give you the classic. I've been working with the city of Old Town for a long time on the Juniper Ridge landfill, which is a real hot button issue there. It's the only state-owned landfill. It's right in Old Town. And there are a lot of people who live near it who have very strong feelings. There are people outside of town who have strong feelings about it, don't think a landfill is there, and they don't think Casella should be operating it. They don't think it should be, the state should be trying to fill it. All right. But the planning board had to review the expansion. Talk about thankless. It went for 6 months with meetings once a month, lots of filings, attorneys on both sides. In the end, the planning board made its decision. The board chair was sitting, and it was very respectful. Everybody listened carefully to each other, and got heated, but it was respectful. One of the members of the audience reached over and took the findings of fact and conclusions of law from the chair and tore them up, and then dropped it on the ground and walked back to her seat. Then she went over and picked it up, realizing she had littered, and tore it. We didn't notice this piece. She was tearing it into 1 million small pieces and then sprinkled them on the head of the attorney for the applicant. We had a police officer outside,
Right.
and he said there was no assault, I didn't come in. And he was right. We let it all just go. That's outrageous stuff.
You don't need to do it.
You don't need
no
the
one,
theatrics.
no one should have to deal with that.
No, no. And I'm sure you won't hear. But there again, it was a question of the planning board, after a 6-month public process, did what it did. It decided in favor of the applicant on the basis of what was submitted, following the ordinance, and there were people out in the
Don't
audience who
matter
were
if you
still
like
unhappy.
it, don't like it.
They didn't like it.
Yeah.
We can't solve everyone's problems. If you
And
have
that's what's
this,
hard sometimes for them to remember, is that the townspeople voted on this.
Right.
This is what the townspeople tells the board to use as a guideline. You can't just willy-nilly decide to change it.
that's the hardest part for a planning board or a board of appeals. You have to apply the ordinance that was enacted.
Right.
You can't change that ordinance.
This is
You
what the
might like
townspeople
to,
want.
but you can't. This
It
is
may
what
not
you-
be those townspeople, but the townspeople that
Right.
voted that night
Right.
voted
Well,
on this.
The other issue that we have in Newry is, there's a lot of people who are here a bunch who don't vote here. Because this isn't, this is
They don't
not.
live here.
Yeah, it's their residents, they're here for the summer or,
Winter, and they're a bunch, but this is their second.
Yeah.
They could choose to live here if they wanted to.
Sure.
But that's a decision they'd have to, now they can't vote at home.
Right.
So-
They'll ski, but they want to be in Massachusetts and vote there 7 months or 8 months out of the year. Well, then so be it. That you don't get a vote, but they do get to speak.
Right.
If they want to drive up for a public hearing,
Right.
for the condominium project or whatever, that's their prerogative.
That's the other piece that I think Newry is very liberal with. For all our meetings, that their meetings, not a public hearing, but other meetings are meetings held in public, not public meetings. But the audience always talks. It hasn't been an issue, and I hope we don't have to change that, but at some point, if that gets out of control.
Yeah. I mean, the Freedom of Access Act talks about public proceedings. Public proceedings would be if you have a quorum of a body and you're meeting to discuss public business, transact public business. The public has a right to speak at a public hearing, but if you're having a workshop, tonight's a workshop. Members of the public wanted to, they could be here. They don't have a right to speak. They have a right to be here and watch and
Right.
listen.
Right.
And if you wanted to ask them questions,
Right.
they could participate.
Right.
And a lot of planning boards and a lot of boards of selectmen in smaller towns will say, it isn't scheduled as a public hearing, but we'd like to hear what you have to say.
Right, and sometimes people
Well,
are
like the
helpful.
regular meetings though, because the planning board meeting isn't a public hearing.
Right.
It's a meeting held in public, but it's
Right,
not a
but we
public
would-
meeting.
Right, it's a public meeting, but it's not a public hearing
Right.
unless you advertise it. But doesn't stop you from asking the public.
Right, but, we don't ask them, but they still interject.
Well, then that's up to the chair to say this isn't a public hearing.
Yeah.
We'll ask for your comment, or maybe the safety valve is to have a short public discussion period on each application at night or
Oh,
something.
actually,
Well-
I'm sorry, the question that I wrote down much earlier in the meeting, I didn't want to interrupt you, but, and this is something I remembered from, just when I was a recording secretary, not on the meeting, but, or a member. When an applicant comes and presents their application,
Mhm.
and we talk about it, and everything's talked, and we've exhausted that topic, they're gonna come back to the next meeting, they pack up, they leave, we do other things. Then we go to open discussion. So the applicant's left the room. Depending on the chairman, sometimes the board will then talk about that application further. Sometimes they don't. They're not supposed to.
Well,
or they
it's not
can.
that they're not
It's still a
supposed to.
public,
Yes, yeah.
they didn't have to leave, but they did leave.
Jim's subdivision is in front of the planning board. I present my subdivision application. I show you the 10 lots I'm going to
Right.
create. And you say, okay, great, Jim, sounds good. Sounds like you're on the right path. We'll see you next, we need a traffic study. We'll put you on the agenda for next month. And Jim leaves the room. I think that that's done.
Right,
I think my item's done.
right.
I would hope
Because
that
at
you're
the
not.
end of the meeting, we always have open discussion for people to talk about, well, a lot of times it's like MMA workshops or
Well, that's fine, yeah, we've got a workshop coming up, who wants to
Different ordinances and
go?
stuff and changes and
Yeah.
stuff, and every
That's
now
fair.
and then, people will start talking about an application, but they can't.
I don't, well, it isn't that, I just don't think that's right, because
Yeah.
the applicants left the room, the people who wanted to talk about it might have left the room.
Right.
I think exhaust your topic while that applicant's on, and then
Right.
you move on to the next agenda item.
Yeah.
You can vote to reconsider an approval, and then say we'll deliberate the next time with notice to everybody, if you needed to reconsider, because you suddenly, but that's a very,
Yeah,
very
A lot
different.
of times they're just, just
Yeah.
talking about what happened and more questions and stuff.
Yeah, I think it would be good form to finish that application and then move on to the next one. At the end of the meeting, if there are some procedural nuts and bolts things like, hey, when are we going to have our next special meeting, or when are we going to schedule a training session, or
Right.
can we send a letter to Jim and say why we think he's all wet with his interpretation of Udro for this process? Whatever, you can do that at the end of the meeting, but don't reopen things that you've already disposed of and everyone's left the room. That's not fair to the process.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Other questions? All right, well, thank you all very much, appreciate it.
Yeah,
It's good
thanks for the
talking
time,
with you.
Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very
Thank you all for coming.
Appreciate it.
Off we go.
My son wanted